Aaron Ask America.
Welcome to Aaron Ask America, where Aaron Ask America the hard questions. Today, I have my friend Chris with me. I'm excited to have him on the podcast today. We've known each other for quite a while now, and so I know him. So some of my questions will be leading because I know some of the things that I want to talk to. So, Chris, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, man, thanks. This is like the fifth time we've been on a podcast together. The first one like this though, so
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to be here. Thank you.
There was that time when Fred was on hiatus at Fire Resistant, and you and Dallas came on. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to get Dallas on here, but he's ghosted me.
Dallas, get on here.
You know, when he watches this, right? This is at the very beginning, and Dallas music podcast. I reached out to Robert, right? Robert about movies because him and I have a lot of like similar movie tastes and stuff like that. So
I don't know where y'all find the time.
So my normal average bedtime is like 1 to 2 a.m. I know you already sleep because you're waking up at like
4 a.m.
4 a.m. So like as you're waking up, I'm going to bed. So that's the difference is I wait for everybody to go to bed and then I can watch whatever I want as far as from a movie perspective.
There you go.
But as far as us goes, right, like we met, we've been going to Second Mile for, I think, 5 years now. So you and your wife have been going there, I think, just a little bit before us, right? So you're like at 6 years, something like that?
Yeah. So her first time coming here was January 20. And she came to hear guest speaker, a pretty popular guest speaker. And she came home raving about it. She wasn't looking for a church. I hadn't really been a part of a church yet. I had just started seeking. I started seeking my faith in 2018. Very dramatic experience we had, and I started seeking my faith. And we had gone to a couple of churches, but it was at that point where like I'd find things wrong with all of them. We've got a pretty big church here that does great things, but they have like a 2-story play place in the front of it. And so like I would ask my kids, "What'd y'all learn today?" "Oh, can we go play?" And I was like, "No." It's like, "Let's go." And so we quit going there, and then she had found a church, and then she just guest speaker showed up, and so she came to Second Mile, and then she came home just excited about it. And then the very next Wednesday, she took my son there, and he came home excited about it. And so I was just like, okay, let's go. And so February 20 was my first week there, and we got 6 weeks in, and then the shutdown happened, and I was just starting to get going, starting to get good, and I was like, yeah, and then all of a sudden it's like, no.
So it sounds like y'all, and for whatever reason, I thought y'all were there a year before us. So you started going there like basically 2 months before we did.
Yeah.
Because at the time that you started going is the time that the previous pastor started losing his mind and melting down. And then I think last week in March was our first last weekend of March 2020 is when we walked in the doors of Second Mile for the first time, and we went and visited a couple other churches just to make sure, but and then when the lockdown happened, we started going there digitally, just like everybody else that
Sure.
going to church at the time. So yeah, so wow. I don't know how my brain didn't remember that y'all were there just a couple months before we were.
I mean, just probably because of that whole hiatus everybody took from the actual building. You didn't really see who else was there during that time period. Was it like 8 weeks, if I remember right, something like that?
Yeah. Well, the thing is when we started going, like we weren't all the way in, right? Because as you know, that building I grew up in, basically, there's a lot of memories in that building. Pastor Todd's family's connection to my family, like there was a whole bunch that I didn't want to. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going there for emotional reasons, right? So there wasn't a lot of checked-in time.
Yeah. Well, I know I was actually kind of fortunate, right? Because I had found this place, and then when we were at home, we were off and on at work. Like we were deemed emergency response when I was working at the record service then. So we would go into the office, but then we would just be sitting there. right? And so when it was funny because my boss actually took vacation for 2 weeks, and my supervisor was like, "Y'all go home. Y'all don't have to stay up here." So we went home for 2 weeks. And then when my boss came back from vacation, he held a company wide meeting and he was yelling at us, like, "Why did y'all go home? Why did y'all go home?" Well, at that point, I'd already worked my way to the top tier. So it was the boss, the supervisor, then me. And I like stood up and was like, "Why are you yelling at us? He told us to go home. We went home."
Yeah.
And then that caused a lot of issues between me and my supervisor because I didn't have his back on that. And so that was kind of a rocky area at that point. But it was one of those things like, why are you blaming us when this guy's right here next to you? And
Yeah.
it's like, he's the one. But it did a lot of good for me because I was able to be at home and really spend that time diving into the Bible. I told you before, my first book of the Bible we actually went through for a full book Bible study was Revelation.
The
And
worst to
so,
do that.
yeah, it was really confusing. But
What do you mean the woman smashing the head of the snake? I don't
yeah,
understand.
yeah,
Like, what is
seven
this?
heads?
Yeah.
What? Seven eyes? What? Yeah, but it was pretty cool. We got to go really in depth with it and everything, and then from there my faith started growing. I was actually baptized June 17th of 2020, so that's coming up on 6 years as
Yeah.
well. And life just changed dramatically for me after that.
Yeah. One thing I want to throw at you before we move on is I'm not sure if it's picking up, but I think when you're hitting the table, it may actually be picking up. I
Okay.
just want to throw that to you just real quick, but I do want to explore that because one of the things that I've enjoyed being at Second Mile is watching like God move in your family's life. So like, how did you go from where you were to where your story begins with Second Mile? Like you said that you went on this journey. Like why did that journey start?
So it's a pretty intense, wild story, right? And I don't know how far you want to go back, but like I never grew up religious. In fact, I grew up with a bunch of disdain for the gospel and for Jesus and all that, just because of the situations with my dad and everything that he put us through growing up. And so I was in my 30s before anything, but we were 2018. I think it was around the 4th of July. We're hanging out at the house, and I had family over, and we were barbecuing and everything like that. And my nephew, my oldest nephew, he's always been a real big prayer warrior. He was an army guy, so he's a little rough around the edges, but he's always been a prayer warrior. And he's over the house, and we had a I guess I could back it up a little further. It was like a 6 month process. My wife started having these dreams, and it was almost like living like live dreams almost. But it was dreams of these dogs, black dogs with red eyes, running around the backyard. And then there was a light figured man standing in the house that was like, "Don't worry, they're not going to come in." And she had this dream several times over the span of 6 months. Well, then my youngest daughter started seeing the same dogs in the windows. And I looked at my wife and I was like, "Why are you telling her this stuff?" My wife's like, "I didn't tell her anything." Right? So fast forward to the that night, and we're barbecuing, partying. I was still drinking kind of heavy at the time, so I was drinking, and we put the girls to sleep. It was late. It was probably midnight or so. And when we put them to bed, they started screaming. And so we ran in there, and they said the shadowy figure walked from their closet to their window. And I was like, no, it was car lights. So we're like going outside, shining flashlights in the windows, and the girls are confused, like, why is he shining flashlights in the windows? And my wife's like, because he's trying to figure out what's going on. And they're like, well, that's nothing compared to what we saw.
Right.
And so I come back in, and we're sitting there in the room, and my nephew's like, hey, let's pray. So my wife and him are praying in the center of the room, and I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of closing my eyes, and then I look up and look around and everything, just like watching them, seeing all this, because I wasn't a real big believer or anything. And they prayed pretty hard for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then as soon as he said amen, I watched the darkness leave the room. my eyes opened completely, and I like the room just lit up, almost like one of those switches, dimmer
Yeah.
switches where you raise it. It was almost exactly like that, and I immediately started just freaking out, bawling, like, what is going on? And I got a call to go do a rec, and it was just running through my mind the whole time I was going through a rec. I couldn't understand what I had just seen, and so I got back and I started talking to my wife about it. I was like, one, like, I have no clue how to protect my daughters from this, and like I know what I just saw, and I'd already been a believer in the spiritual and all that, but I wasn't a believer in Jesus, just because I wouldn't say. I guess it was like that hatred I had because I blame my dad for everything.
Yeah.
But I after that night I was like, I got to get off. Like, I undoubtedly, right? Like,
Yeah.
undoubtedly, oh my god, this is real. Like, what am I doing? I'm an idiot. I'm a fool. And so from then on, I stopped drinking heavily. It wasn't until after, probably when we shut down, when I actually quit drinking completely. But I stopped drinking so much and really just started questioning things and started listening to the Bible app and really just trying to figure things out. And then, like I said, in 2020, when we started going through Revelation, I really, really like dove in.
Yeah. Excuse me. Um, that story reminds me of I don't know if you've read any of those dreams that people that are in like Saudi Arabia and stuff like that, where where they have a dream where they dream of Jesus,
Yeah.
and then they're like, this guy's real, and then God uses that person to start some sort of pocket there, and I feel like that moment where the light switch was turned on for you, that was like that moment where it's like, okay, you had two ways you could go. You could be like, something weird just happened and have a good day, or you could accept that somehow through this prayer that God intervened directly through you, and praise God that you looked at it as a, hey, God exists, and he just flipped the switch, right? So,
And that's exactly what it was, And I know I've shared some details with you about things that have happened since then,
yeah,
that have been just wild too. But the other side of that story, that we didn't find out till we were moving out of that house, because that house was my Janelle's grandfather's, and then my father-in-law was like, hey, why don't I, because I had to live in a certain radius from the record service, and we just didn't have the money at that time to do that. He goes, why don't I move him out of that house, and I will move y'all into that house, and then y'all can just pay rent to me. And I was like, awesome, that saves us a lot, right? So
yeah,
there's a lot of back history that they knew, because they had owned the house. The house had been in the family for a long time, and we didn't know. But when we went to move out, Janelle's mom was like, "Oh, I wonder if we'll find the scratch marks." And we're like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Oh, I never told you about the crazy girl." And we're like, "No, you never told us about the crazy girl." And evidently, the story was, when they bought the house back in the 80s or whatever, that the family that owned it before had a girl that was absolutely out of her mind and a threat to everyone. And they would lock her in her bedroom, and she would scratch the door with her nails and just scratch the door with anything she had in her room, and like all sorts of stuff like this. And lo and behold, like, there was always a rough spot on the door, on the door frame, and it was like, that was their room.
yeah,
That was their room. And it was like, no wonder we had issues. But thankfully, my wife, being that, she's as faithful as she's always been, she ended up, after that night, she wrote in Hebrew, like, the fruits of the Spirit, the names of Jesus, the names of God, the Holy Spirit, all of it in Hebrew on the walls. She wrote Isaiah 40, a passage from Isaiah 41 on the walls, where he's like, I've called you by name. and all of that. She wrote it real big on the walls and everything. So really just bathed that room in scripture and everything. And
Right.
then we found out that story as we were moving out, and it's like, thanks for
That's wild.
telling
Yeah,
us.
that's wild. That's why it's important. And we've been in this house 20 years, so I can't say that we did it. But that's why it's important that any Christian, whether you think I'm crazy or not, right? I know you don't, but like when you go to purchase a house, like before you move in, like pray over the house.
Absolutely.
There are circles that of people that I know that they get some church members and they do what's called a prayer walk. They walk around the house, pray
Yeah.
over the house because you don't know what has happened inside the house, and it sounds like the leftovers of whatever was going on with that girl that was locked in the room was left over in your daughter's room, right? And then when that prayer happened, it get out of here, right? Just
Yeah.
because we have the same command over the spirits, right, as Jesus did. So we tell them in the name of Jesus, get out of here. They got to go.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, we actually did that in the house we're in now. Before we moved the furniture in, we called over our pastor and his wife, and we, all four of us, we went through the house. We prayed upstairs, downstairs,
yeah,
and everything, and in the rooms, everywhere. So, yeah. Yeah, 100% a believer in that. We've got scripture on the walls in our house, everything, right? And it's just, I'm a firm believer that, you bathe your house in that stuff, right? And they
yeah.
can't come in.
Do you have Proverbs 5:19 kind of all over the house?
Not Proverbs 5:19, but we have
Yeah,
scriptures.
I'm just messing.
We have scripture everywhere.
For those that are listening, they'll look up Proverbs 5. You know Proverbs 5:19. That's my life verse.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. I know what you're talking about now. That's
Yes, yeah,
hilarious.
yeah. I found that verse whenever I was going to Park Glen, right? Park Glen Baptist, which of course is now Second Mile. Whenever I was a teenager, when I found out that was my life verse from going forward. But without derailing us too much, so one of the things I would love to touch on is when you and I met, and you mentioned this before that you were in the wrecker service, and then you had this moment where I'm assuming, don't let me put words in your mouth, that you kind of understood that your oldest was about to graduate. You're like, hey, I was in this world for so long. I'm not going to do that anymore. And you walked away from a job that people are like normal people, or not normal people, people outside the church might be like, oh, yeah, that's crazy. But like you felt the call to walk away from that job. And then like, how did you know when you should walk out of that job? And then you can kind of explain how, if you want to, how you went from this job that the world would be like, you're doing this, to now working for God in this pregnancy for you center. Did I say it right?
Pregnancy help for you.
No,
Yeah,
I left
it's
out
all
the
good.
one word.
It's all good. Yeah, so it's a wild, wild story in its own right,
Yeah.
because I was like my mid 20s, and I was mad because I was working for a warehouse job, and they did me dirty. I asked for a raise because I was doing like 3 jobs. They gave me a raise, and then like the week later they took it away from me, and I went into the human resources manager and I was like, "Hey, my raise is gone. Like, what happened?" And he was like, "Oh, I mistakenly gave that to you. It was supposed to be for your boss." And I'm like, "I quit," you know? And I was like, "I'm done." And I just happened to go on Facebook, and my wife's aunt at the time was a dispatcher there, and she was like, "Hey, we're looking for record drivers. Anybody know anybody?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll give it a shot." Lo and behold, I didn't know what all that would entail, and it was intense. The company I worked for, we worked Rex, so we worked for the city, for the
Yeah.
police department, and so we worked for 6 different cities. We worked for the airport, and everything on their property, and then we worked for the sheriff's department too. So we were busy.
Yeah.
We were very busy, and I'm talking about, like, I didn't know that I was going to go into domestic war zones day in and day out, and I was going to see death and destruction and human bodies in a way that most people couldn't
Yeah.
even imagine.
So when you go on your first call and you come across a fatality, like how do you not like get in your truck and then drive away or do your job and be like, hey, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to work
So for
another
me,
fatality.
maybe it's because of all the drama and the trauma that I grew up in,
Mm.
and everything like that. But it never affected me, right? I mean, it did affect me, but not to a certain extent. I've watched guys go on one fatality and have nightmares for weeks, and then my boss would put them through counseling, and then he'd put on there because everybody had a driver number, and he put on there, hey, no fatalities anymore. Like they're done, they can't do it. But
That would be me.
I never had a problem with it. It never phased me like that. I would go out there and like the cops would be like, "You want to see it?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And then they'd be like, "Oh," and like we would snap pictures and everything. And there was one time where like the guy was impaled, and I grabbed my phone and I was like, "Oh!" And the fire and like the police officer, the sergeant was like, "Hey, hey, hey, the driver's right there behind you." And like I looked over, the driver's freaking out because he's looking at his buddy that is now
Yeah.
toast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay,
Wow.
but I never had an issue with it. And I did that job for 10 years at one company and then 2 years at another company. And I started out in a light duty. I worked my way up to a $1.2 million truck that was just a phenomenal truck. And it was an amazing job. I was doing things all over the world or all over the country. We would work hurricanes. We would run for hurricane relief. So there'd be times where I'd be gone for 2 weeks at a time, living out of a truck.
Yeah.
There was a few times where we set through the hurricanes. One time when we were driving down the coast of Florida, going down from Jacksonville to Daytona Beach, and we were driving down as the hurricane's making landfall. And so when we pulled off the highway, we were the only two trucks on the highway, and we got these giant, massive generators behind us. And when we pulled off the highway, we're dodging palm trees to get into the parking lot where we're supposed to be, and sitting out the hurricane. So we did some pretty crazy stuff. We also ran for tour buses. We did tour buses and stuff like that. So I'd go all over the country and tow these really famous people's tour buses and all sorts of stuff. And so I got to do some really, really cool things. But it was probably about nine years into it. I was working 80 to 100 hours a week, right? I got really good at my job and worked my way all the way up to the top. I said earlier, like it was my boss, my supervisor, then me. And
Yeah.
my supervisor didn't want to do much. So he was always sending me out, and I would take as much as I could because I was making a killing. I mean, a killing. There was some weeks where I'd just rake in the dough, man. And or my taxes were more than most normal people's paychecks.
Yeah.
And it was just raking it up. Looking back on it, like it wasn't that great because I was working more than two full-time jobs, so
Right.
like it doesn't add up,
So
right?
if you
But
cut it in half, you're just making two normal
yeah,
wages.
yeah, but such is life, right?
Right.
I was just raking in the cash, and I was just like, all right, like go, 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 go. So even when I wasn't out of town, like I would work 24, 36 hours straight and then come home and sleep and go back to work. So my family wasn't seeing me much. And then my son, who is now graduated high school, he became a freshman in high school. And I remember back, I was privileged enough to go through training with the guy that designed the trucks. He was the head engineer that designed the trucks from the best company that designed wreckers, Miller Industries, and all that. So I got to go through his class a few times. And I remember during one of our breaks, a guy asked him, he had been in the industry for like 35, 40 years. He had done some amazing stuff overseas and everything like that. And somebody asked him, is like, what is your biggest regret from being in this industry? And he said, the day I was walking my daughter down the aisle and I realized all the time I'd missed. And that always stuck with me. And my son hit freshman in high school, and I was like, oh my God, like, I've been doing this 9 years. Like I've missed almost his entire life. I missed Christmases. I missed birthdays. Just everything. And like that really started running through my mind. I was like, I've got two young daughters. Like I cannot be doing this. And so I started getting really depressed. And it's actually a pretty amazing story. But
Outside of the depression, of course.
Yeah, outside of the depression.
You're
But
like, I was depressed. It was amazing.
no, that wasn't the
Yeah,
amazing
no,
the
no.
amazing part. But I was going through a little bit of depression at the time, and I started talking with my wife about getting out of the record service. And then my father-in-law, who you've met, he works at Lockheed, and so he
Hmm.
was like, "Hey, why don't I get you on out here?"
I think that was right when you and I met and we started becoming friends because I remember you were going for Lockheed.
So yes, and so the crazy part, like we were sitting there talking, and it was like February time, and I'm talking with my wife, and she was like, what is the time frame you're thinking?" And I told her, I was like, September 1st. Like, I don't know why, but September 1st seems like the perfect time. She was like, okay. And she was like, so we'll plan for September 1st. And I was like, okay, I'll make August 1st will be my last day. And I'll take a month off. And then September 1st is when the job will be there. She was like, okay. So this is February. I put in a 6-month notice
Yeah.
to my job, right? Told them, hey, July 31st can be my last day. I'm done. And they were like, okay. And the owner, he didn't say anything to me. Not a word to me up until 2 weeks before that time came in the middle of July. And he was like, he called me into his office. He's like, is there anything I could do for you to stay? And I was like, I'm pretty sure that ship sailed about 6 months ago.
I told you,
Like,
yeah.
you didn't, you told me no, right? And the part of that reason was when things slowed down in when the shutdown happened, I lost about $50,000 a year in salary, right? Because I wasn't going out and doing these things and stuff like that. And I went to him and I was like, look, I was like, I need your help, right? Like, this is the situation I'm in. And he goes, well, I can't do nothing for you. I'm losing money too. And I was like, that's the wrong answer,
Yeah.
right? Like, I've made you a ton of money. You literally ordered me this big truck and put me in it. And I was like, and then now you're going to tell me I can't help you when I've been helping you beyond, above and beyond this entire time. And so I told him that ship has sailed. And so I took off that month, and lo and behold, September 1st, I get on Glassdoor because that was the app they were using, and that job opened up on September 1st, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I was like, thank you, Lord. Like, what is that? That's amazing. Like, I pegged that 6 months ago, and obviously it wasn't me that pegged it, but that
Yeah.
was just the date that was popped in my head. And so I applied for it. I made it through the Glassdoor system, right, and then processed through that, and I made it onto the Lockheed recruiters, and then I started talking to my father-in-law, and he got it passed on, and I answered the Lockheed questions, and then it got passed on for me to go to an interview. And before anything of that nature happened, he 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 called me one day, and he was like, "I just want to let you know, our unions just got a message from the board of Lockheed that said any contractors and subcontractors on premise will be vaccinated." And I know everybody has different thoughts on that and stuff like that. My personal opinion was not to get it, right?
Right.
And so I said, well, that pretty much ends that. It's a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then the very next week, comes to find out the guy that said he was gonna get me on there was completely lying, and he didn't have anything to do with the hiring process. So it like all fell apart like
Just like
that.
that. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, what now? I had one of the guys I had trained over the years was now the manager at another record service, and so I went there working with him. And like he brought me on as his top guy, and it was good. I was guaranteed a great salary. Like everything was good job wise there, but again, I
The
was working
hours. Yeah.
hours, long hours. I was working nights too, starting out. So long hours and just lack of sleep, and really just thinking about now we're into my son's junior year, right? And I'm like, here we are again. Like this is not what I was looking for. So at that point, I got super depressed, really really bad off. I think I dropped 40 pounds because I wasn't eating, and it just got really bad. My wife was really concerned at that time, and I always told her, like, I've always been against suicide, and so I told her no matter how bad it got, that was never an option because I love my family and I love God and everything, that like this wasn't that was never going to be an option no matter how bad it got. I just got to figure things out in my own head. And so again, like 2 years later, I walked away from it, and that was in September. And so we were sitting there and I didn't know what I was going to do, right? I know we had some money saved up. I didn't know I was going to have to stretch out as far as it did, but we had some money saved up. So my plan was to take some time off and then maybe after Christmas try to figure something out. And so I told her, I told my wife, I was like, look, is like the first thing we're gonna do is with this time off, we're gonna dive into our faith and our marriage. So we started doing marriage devotionals. We started doing Bible devotionals. We started doing these things, watching sermons. We'd spend like 4 or 5 hours a day in the mornings to like noon, 1 o'clock doing this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was great. It was a great time, and I was really diving into my faith. That's when I started helping out with the youth and everything else like that. And then something crazy happened. There was in January, the Pregnancy Center, Pregnancy Help for You, came to give a presentation at our church about what they did and how they were looking for volunteers. They needed women volunteers to come beside clients and talk with them, and they needed male volunteers to talk with the guys that come through the center and everything. And so, being that we were teenagers when my son was born, I was like, hey, I can do that. I can volunteer and talk to these guys. I've got nothing else going on. And so, there was two guys that came there. One was my director's husband, and the other one was the husband of a lady that still is a part of the center, but they live in Colorado. And that guy's got an amazing story. Ray is an amazing man. And he was a volunteer. But the thing with the way the program was running then was that they would have male volunteers, but the thing with guys are, unless you're old and retired, then you're working, right? And so they would call them whenever they were at work and they'd be like, hey, there's a guy in the center. Can you come by? And then usually by the time they got over there, they either have like 5 or 10 minutes with them or they would already be gone.
Right.
And so it really wasn't working out. And I didn't know it at that point, but I had started communicating with those two guys that first night, and her husband had prayed with me, and then I started connecting with Ray. Well, Ray and Millie, they actually started coming to Second Mile for a little bit. And every time he was there, I would make sure to go up and talk with him. He was just a great guy, and when he's in the room, I describe him as when he's in the room, he's one of the guys I want to be talking to.
Right.
And so I would start talking with him, and then about the fifth or sixth time I walked up to him, because they would sit at the back of the church, I walked up to him and be like, hey man, what's going on? He just looked me dead in the eye and said, hey, if there was an opportunity at the center for you, would you take it? And I was like, I don't think I could say no. Like, I just felt like in that moment, I was like, huh, okay. Like,
So what you're
yes.
saying is there's a chance.
Yeah, right. There's a chance. And so I had a talk with them, and it was funny because I didn't know it was like an interview per se, but I went up there and I sat through one of their meetings, and I was just kind of joking around with them. It was the first time the director had met me, and I didn't know who she was at that point. But he was there with me, and we were sitting at opposite ends. Like, there was a table here and a table here, and I was sitting at this table, and he was sitting there. And somebody had brought donuts, and so they set them on his table, and I was like, hey, Ray, toss me a donut. And he was like, no. We come to find out the lady that was running the meeting was my director.
Oh, okay.
And so, like, first impression, right? Let me throw a donut across the room.
I'll catch it in my mouth. I'll catch it in my mouth. Arr.
Yeah,
And she's like,
not a
"Oh,
very good impression.
Hello, Chris. You have donut. You're like, hello.
So, it was. I had a meeting with her that day, and she was like, "Okay, well, we have our annual gala coming up here in about a month, so let's get through that, and then I'll call you in." And I was like, "Okay." And then the stretching out the money thing. I
Yeah.
started getting a little like, okay, like I need something to happen, and so I started texting her, getting a little impatient, and I was like, hey, can I come help you at the gala in any way? And she goes, yeah, come on. So I went up there and I helped them set up for the gala, and then she was like, hey, will you work security for the meet and greet? I was like, sure. Who's the speaker? And she said it was Dr. Ben Carson. And I didn't know who he was at that
Yeah.
point. Like I knew he had tried to run for president, but I didn't know much about the guy. Turns out he's a really phenomenal guy. Like he stood when he got up on stage to speak, he literally stood up there and said, "I was the guy that was the first one to successfully separate Siamese twins in the womb." And I was like, "You have my attention, sir." You know?
Yeah.
It's like when you start out like that, it's like, "Wow, like this dude's something different,
Yeah.
right?" And so I heard his story and everything like that, and but I got to work security for the meet and greet and stuff, and I got a signed copy of his book, Gifted Hands, and and then she was like, "How about Friday you come in and talk?" And so I started that next Monday, right? And I've been
So
there. April 4th, I was a year. So I've been there a little over a year now.
so let's talk about that real quick because I we've talked about the pregnancy help for you, right? So what is it for anybody that may be listening in the DFW area? What is it and what is its purpose?
So Pregnancy Help for You is a pro-life options clinic, and I say options clinic because we educate on your options. First one now, thank God, abortion is illegal in the state of Texas, so
Woohoo.
that's not an option. Um, Unfortunately, there's still ways around that. People are
Right.
still smuggling in pills
Pills, yeah.
and everything like that. But we basically what the process is, we provide free services to anyone in the community. The only thing is like if they've been to an OBGYN or a doctor already, we tell them no. Like our services are for people that haven't been to the doctor yet or can't afford to go to the doctor yet.
Okay.
And so, but all of our services are free. We hand out diapers and wipes and formula, and everything we have is free to give, and we give it all away. We host classes over parenting, over financial, just really trying to help these people get set up for life. And then what we do there at the center is we do pregnancy tests, sonograms. We'll do STI testing and treatment. We have biblical counselors that are on staff that will sit down and we'll have a one-on-one counseling session with you, and things like that. All of our stuff is provided to our clients that come through our doors. And my job there is I was originally so my actual job title is outreach coordinator, right? I have my executive director, I have my outreach director, and then I'm an outreach coordinator. And we're basically the outreach team. We go out to local churches and we talk to them about what we do and see if they want to come on board, either financially or like hosting our classes or however they can, diaper drives, donations, whatever. We try to get the churches involved in the center somehow. And then we also go out into the chambers and spread look for donors and sponsors and stuff like that through other local businesses. And when I'm not doing that, my job is to every time there's a couple that comes in the center, we have to take the women back by themselves behind a locked door, right?
Yeah.
And the reason being is you don't know their situation. We don't know if there's abuse. We don't know if she's being trafficked, anything like that. And so or maybe she has just an overbearing husband or boyfriend that likes to answer all the questions for her,
Yeah.
and
Pressure.
these ladies
Yeah.
can't talk, right? So they go back, and we have lady volunteers that come in, and after their pregnancy test, they sit down and they have a conversation with them. That conversation can go 20 minutes, it can go 45 minutes, it can go an hour. Hopefully not an hour because we have so many patients that we roll through. But sometimes if it gets good, that's what they do.
Yeah.
In that process, depending on a questionnaire they fill out, if they are abortion minded or abortion vulnerable, then we sit down and we educate them on what abortion actually does, how damaging it is to the body, how traumatic it is to the person, and we explain like the steps of abortion. And then we explained to them their other options, which would be adoption or parenting. And we are a safe adoption place, so they can meet the adoption agencies there at our center to hand over the baby and stuff like that. And then while they're going through that whole process with them, I call the guy into my office and I sit down and I talk with him. And we try to have resources available for them, whether it be if he's looking for a better job or whether he's looking for he needs, like, he never graduated high school or whatever. Like, we're trying to provide these things for them. Whether they need food, we can provide food programs for them. Get them set up with a place that will has food banks or has food programs so that they can get that. Doing all these things to just support their family. Also, as long as they say yes, one of the first questions we have to ask is, if any point in time in this conversation, if it happens to go spiritual, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
And whether that be talking about the Bible or whether that be prayer or anything like that. If they say yes, green light, go, right?
Yeah.
Now we're hitting them with the gospel. We're talking about Jesus. We're praying over their situation, and we're basically giving their salvation. And we've had this year alone, we've had over 100.
100 guys come through?
No, I'm sorry. Yes, this year we've had over 120 guys come through.
Wow.
But this year, out of all the people we've given the gospel, we've had, I think it was 11 salvations.
Nice.
Right? So it's kind of a statistic that we keep, right? Because it's just an amazing thing, you know? And we rely heavily on volunteers to come in and talk with these men and women. Right now, I don't have any guys really that other than me that are talking with these men, and so we're missing quite a few of them because I have another job to do in the community. So if I'm not there, they're not getting talked to, and I have to kind of catch up with them later. But we're sitting down and we're just trying to support these families as best we can, in hopes that they can get a leg up in life.
Yeah, I know that Chrissy and I came over there. I want to say it was probably a year ago. It's just, just like you have these things set up in your head, like, hey, I'm going to volunteer, but then like all of a sudden, like, when do I have time to volunteer? Because I am working from whatever to whatever, but like from a goal perspective, of course, like my goal hopefully by the end of the year, hopefully sooner, is to go back full time real estate. And when I do that, then I'll have the ability to schedule in time to actually come in there and do. And I think that'll be a positive in its own. But aside from that, like, you texted the men's group this week on something that was pretty awesome. I want to get that story in there. Like, y'all had y'all's first reversal.
Abortion reversal pill birth, second birth. We had one last year, and now we've had one here. And basically, the way that works, if you don't know, with the abortion pill, it's 2 steps, right? Progesterone is the hormone, the vitamins that go to the baby, that grows the baby, right? And basically what it works is the abortion pill is a 2-step pill, and I'm not talking about the morning after pill. That stops ovulation, right? That is something completely different. But the actual abortion pill after the baby's growing, it's a 2-step process. The first one stops vitamin production, stops the progesterone going to the baby, so basically starves the baby. And then the second one just starts the contractions to expel the baby, right? And then if the baby is too big to expel, then they have to go in and pluck it out piece by piece. And so it's actually a very horrible situation. But the great news is, like, if a woman takes that first pill, there is now an abortion reversal pill, which is basically like a heavy dose shot of progesterone to reshock the system into producing again, and also give the vital nutrients to that baby to keep it not hopefully keep it from dying.
Yeah.
And so there's a very short window of time. I think it's 48 hours you have to get this pill. You can't keep it there because it expires. And so we have nurses that are amazing ladies. They're on call 24/7, right? And if the national hotline, there's a national hotline that if they're dealing with these women, they contact the closest center, and that is where they send them. And so they're on call 24/7 in case of emergencies like this. And if that's the case, it could be midnight and they'll send a mass text out to the ladies and be like, "Hey, I've got an APR girl coming in. I need somebody there. I need a client advocate, basically somebody that can advocate live for this young lady and be there with her. Like, I need somebody there." And one of the other ladies will be like, "Hey, I'll be there."
Yeah.
And it's
So
pretty amazing. But the way this works is you have a 48-hour window and you get it in, and that's not a one. It's not a guarantee, you know. But you get it in, you take the pill, and then a few days later they can go on and do a sonogram and see if it worked or not. Well, out of all the times where we've tried this, it's been successful twice,
yeah.
and the second one was just born last week. So it's pretty amazing,
Yeah,
you know.
got the picture of it.
Yeah.
We all kind of celebrated in chat because it is a miracle baby. That was going to be the question that I have just for people that might come across this later on or whenever. So you take the pill, you immediately regret it, you call this 1-800 number, and then you can get some sort of injection to reverse it, but it's still not like 100%. So,
No, it's not. The only 100% way of doing it is to not take it,
right,
right?
right.
And that's when I say thank God that, you know, abortion is now illegal here, right?
Right.
So it's increasingly harder to get, but it's still possible. Abortion is still legal in Oklahoma. You can drive up there and get one,
Right.
right? And that's what sucks, right? Like, unfortunately, we can't control what they do,
Right.
right?
They could drive to
So
Colorado. They could drive wherever they wanted to.
the great
Have
thing
it.
is there was a bill just passed to cut funding for Planned Parenthood, and it's been passed in the Senate, and I think it's got to go to the House to pass at the House in order to
Yeah.
cut funding. So hopefully it is, because you think of Planned Parenthood, you think of something good, and
They're
they're
not.
a murderous organization in my
Yeah.
eyes, you know.
Well,
So
I mean, I think Planned Parenthood, I think at the beginning, because, whenever I was a teenager, I knew that girls went to Planned Parenthood to get, what's it, the stuff that regulates the birth control. They would get it from there and stuff like that. But, we've seen through videos and leaked stuff of what they're really about. And
oh, absolutely.
fully of I'm fully on board with cutting it and at least cutting it from a national level and giving it to the states. I think you and I both agree states' rights a big thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't, and so it would be nice to say, hey, cut it out in general, but you know that there's always going to be a fight for that.
Yeah.
But it's something that, like, at least on a local level, our governor here is a firm believer in Christianity and stuff like that, and so he said no. He
Yeah.
said no, absolutely not, and that's amazing. But there's still people out there doing it, you know,
Right.
and so yeah, if they take that first pill and they immediately regret it, then there is a short window. It's actually smaller than 48 hours, because once they come in, you have to overnight that pill or shot, or I'm
Yeah.
not sure actually. No, it's a pill, abortion pill reversal.
Yeah.
So you have to overnight it, right? And so they have to overnight it and get it in, and so you have that much shorter amount of time
Yeah.
to take it. But you know, hey, it's an amazing process. You know, miracle of modern medicine, right? You know, we have it now, and we can use it, and we are using it, and so it's pretty amazing to see this baby born.
Yeah. Anytime that you see something like that, like I said, when you sent the picture, the picture comes up, the picture catches your eye before the text, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like, did Chris and Janelle, did they adopt a baby? So when I saw that it was a saved baby, I was like, dude, that's amazing. That's part of the whole reason of why you're doing and why the women over there do what they do, right? That's the whole reason for that, is to save as many babies as possible. So I definitely was overjoyed when I saw that photo. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on is the recent events of what is going on as far as our little men's group that we had going on, right? Or that we have going on. That's we've talked about it several times on Fire Resistant because I want any man that's involved in a church that doesn't have something like this, that they need to start it. So we've told people that have come onto the show, just, in the chat, like, hey, if you don't have this at your church, men need this. And we'll get to the reason why men need this here in a minute. But like, there was this group that started out where it's like, hey, and maybe even in Dallas has started. I don't even know how me, you, and Dallas started meeting up. I really don't remember. I just remember us meeting at the taco joint, and then Evan, and then Mike, and then all of a sudden, I remember when it exploded. But like, the thing that I like to talk about with this specific thing is how God turned this, it was a Tuesday meetup, into something much, much bigger and better that led to the thing that we had at Steve's firehouse to what we've got going on now. But like, do you remember how that got started? Like, was it your idea? Because I don't remember it being my idea, but it could have been mine.
No, what I'll tell you is, Dallas, come on the show. But Dallas is a very good hype man, and
Yeah,
I think it was his
yeah.
idea. He's
Was
like,
it
"Hey
going to
guys," he's like, let's get
Fuzzy's
some
Tacos?
food."
Yeah.
No, actually, was it Fuzzies or Roses? I don't remember.
I think
No,
we started
it's
out at Fuzzy's, and then
Fuzzies.
we ended up at Rose's when we got more.
Yeah, and so it was. I think it was his idea.
Yeah.
Balcony sitting and just having a good old time, and we enjoyed it. The three of us, we did it a couple of times and enjoyed it, and then we're like, hey, I think I don't remember if I had already invited Evan to my small groups or not at that point. I think I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hey, and you said, this is great. Like, maybe we should get some more guys involved. And we were like, hey, there's these two new guys that have started coming to the church. Why don't we invite them? And then it turned into the three that are that originally started with us. And then it just exploded. Like,
Yeah.
it was like, we need this for everybody. And so it was nice, and I get that not everybody can make it all the time.
Right.
But man, like, it's nice to go out to the restaurants like we do and have some grub and sit outside and everything like that. And it's pretty good when it's like that. But whenever we take it inside and it's more intimate setting,
Yeah.
something real happens, and I think that's something, like you were saying, that every guy needs. But it seems like God brings the men who need to be there every
There.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So.
it's been great.
Yeah, so like that's the thing that I wanted to throw out there is what I've learned even through now, the way I am right now. Like, I realize that the biggest tool that the enemy has for men is isolation.
Absolutely.
So like, what this group has done is shown me and other guys there that you're not alone, right? You can tell me, like, I mean, like, ever since I've gotten to know Fred, like, one of the things I've siphoned off from him and taken from him is being a vault. Like, if you come to me and you just want to yell, scream, cuss, and all that sort of stuff, it's going to go in the vault. It's going to stay there. No one's going to know about it. No one's going to judge or anything like that, because that's just what you needed for that moment. But like, some guys just aren't built that way. So being in a setting where it's like, okay, now I see Chris is talking about something, he's making himself vulnerable, and nobody's laughing or cutting
Sure.
up or anything like that. Then Aaron shares something, and then Fred will share something, and then all of a sudden you get this comfortableness, or however you want to call it, this familiarness with each other, to be like, okay, then that's when Scripture is being fulfilled, with us holding each other up and holding each other accountable. Like, the the story that I always share, and I don't drop any names, of course, because it's nobody's business,
Sure.
right? Was the time at the firehouse when the person, I'm saying person because I'm not trying to whatever, but when the person confessed to doing drugs, and they didn't know how to stop, and they also did drugs on the church, like, premises, right? So it's like, who in the world, like, I look at me, no matter what age I am, whether I'm 5, hopefully I'm not doing drugs at 5, but 5, 10, 15, 20, 20. I would never, because pastor was in that meeting, and like there was no judgment from anybody in that room, including the head pastor of the church, right? Saw this for what it was. It was a moment where somebody in their humanity was just saying, hey, I need help. I need you to, I need it. I don't know how to stop. Help.
Absolutely, absolutely. And first off, like I just want to say that's one of the things that I fell in love with about Second Mile is that it's being led by a man who will stand up and say, "I'm a sinner."
Yeah.
Right? I fail. I make mistakes. I am nobody special, right? And neither are any of these other guys that stand up here on Sunday, right? And that's pretty amazing to me, right? Just because of how I grew up, like you didn't never knew that was a thing. But you're absolutely right, man. I mean, I may be getting a little emotional here, but I mean it's perfectly fine. Yeah, no, like there's no judgment, right? And I think that's one of the great things about Second Mile is that we can be open like that and not have to worry about anything, and just be there for each other. Like that's something that, like you said, this group has started out doing, and it's something that men need in general,
Yeah.
right? And I think the greatest thing about it was we started doing this, and it was right before The Forge had actually came out in theaters, right? And so we started doing this, and then it was just like confirmation because The Forge had actually started coming out, and we went and watched The Forge, and I was like, "That's what we're doing!" Like, yes, you know. And it was pretty cool. I've often said like, there's been several points in my life where like it's not conviction, it's confirmation.
Yeah.
And it's like when you get to that point, oh, sorry, look, emotion. When you get to that point, like it's pretty awesome, right? It's pretty awesome to see, and it's you give God the glory in that moment. But it was real. I mean, and it's been real, right? Just whether we were at the firehouse, whether we were at the church, whether we were at the house we were at,
Yeah.
wherever, like just being able to lean on one another has been pretty amazing, and I really feel that, and it's happened in several places in my life, with where I'm at now, being able to lean on the guys there plus the workout group I'm with, and everything like that, and it's awesome to see, awesome, and it's something that most guys don't understand they need,
Yeah.
right? Especially from this generation, right? They need to understand, like, yes, you need this. We all need this because we're called to carry each other's burdens. We're called, if you want to live, even if you're not a Christian, right? This is how God intended us to live, is to carry each other's burdens, to be there for one another, right? We mourn with each other. We we celebrate with each other. We do life together,
Right.
and that's because we're not meant to carry it on ourselves. We're meant to give our burdens to God, but to help each other go through our struggles. Because what I'm struggling with, you may not be struggling with, and what you're struggling with, I may not be struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's one thing I can understand is that whatever I'm struggling with and whatever you're struggling with can bring us to the same place, right? That same feeling. And to be able to connect in that, and just for you to understand that you're not the only one going through that stuff is life changing.
I totally agree, and I'm glad that that God has started this because it was definitely a God thing because I wasn't looking for this. I was happy and content streaming Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Fred sent me a text last night. I'm going to be back in town Sunday night. We're get ready. We're going to do this and I told him we're doing. I told him that we're going to do the thing at the church on Monday. He's like, can't wait. So he's going to be there, and this whole dad tribes thing that I'm a part of now. Like I'm going to be putting something into the group on Sunday night, like I did the last time, to say, hey, because last time it was Memorial Day, so like there was quite a bit. I want to say quite a bit. There was some interest in showing up at the church, but like Memorial Day, right? People had stuff going on. I think you had something going on. So the three of us that were there were the reason, like all of that distraction, right? Because that's what you were saying earlier. Like the people that needed to be there were there, right? So there's conversations that happened between us three that wouldn't have happened if you were there.
Sure.
It wouldn't have happened if you, Lupe, Mike, everybody else. There was conversations that needed to take place that took place. It was wild. It was wild because like it was me and Evan at the beginning, and then like I was like, oh, I guess it's just us. So we just kind of chit chatted, and then Fred come rolling in, and you know how Fred is. He rolled in, and all of a sudden like everything's different, and it just popped off
He's
from
like a
there.
Christian Tasmanian devil. Rah, 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 rah,
He's got the
rah.
beard and everything. I can't wait to have him on here because, like, and we're gonna get into we'll get into. I'll remember that you call him a Tasmanian devil. We'll see
The
if
Christian Tasmanian devil.
Well, because he might take offense to that.
Tasmanian Christian.
Because
We'll call it
no,
that way
because
because I
like
know he doesn't like the devil name.
as you know, he's Pentecostal, and you know the way that the Tasmanian devil, right? I'll be like, okay, that was Chris that said it. I didn't say that.
We'll leave the devil out of it. It's Tasmanian Christian.
Yeah, but yeah. So that's been one of the things that I've been very excited to see of what's going on with the church, and PT's coming on. I think this week, like
Really?
or the following week. I got whatever the timeline is. He's going to make room. He's going to come on here because he wants to talk about of course things of God, but then also talk about how we're connected and the legacy of whatever you want to call.
I want you to get through the first 30 minutes without mentioning Batman.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can because like what I'm going to do is when I know for sure what date he's going to be here, one of these Batman, probably the one on the end because that's two Affleck Batmans, right? But the one on the end I'm going to change over to Batman 66 because Batman 66 is his deal. And as you can tell, I know the camera's not over there, you can't see it, but all that over there's not a single Batman 66 like
Really?
Funko Pop over there. No, not
Why
a single
not?
one. Huh?
Why not?
I love Batman 66. It's what introduced me to the character, but for whatever reason, I don't have any Batman 66 stuff. Right?
Shame on you,
It
sir.
is a shame on me, but however, as much as I love the Batman 66 and Adam West and all the corniness, this right here, he is the Dark Knight, right? But Adam West Batman was more of like the White Knight, just because he was so goofy and all that sort of stuff. But like that's my gig, right? All those over there, and because like I was introduced to Batman, right? And I'll probably go over this again, but like I was introduced to Batman at my grandma's house. There was nothing to do at her house except for watch TV, and on the middle of the day they would show like 4 episodes of Batman 66. And have you ever seen Batman 66? Mm-hmm. So each episode ends with a cliffhanger unless it's the end of the cliffhanger.
I remember you talking with Evan on that, and I was
Yeah.
like, I was thinking back to it, and I'm like, you know what? He's exactly right.
Yeah, they would show different ones.
Yeah.
So like that was my introduction to the character, and then my Aunt Tammy, who's passed away, she took me to see Batman '89, and then that just changed everything between me and the character. And like Batman 66 has its place, but I mean, this is Batman '89. This is something that my producer son Dexter bought for me for Christmas this year. That's why it showed up here because it's Batman '89. It's got my favorite Batmobile in there, and then of course the greatest Batman, Ben Affleck Batman, right there. They will always have a house there at some point. This statue will always be here at some point in some avenue or whatever. This may change, and maybe we'll stream from a different location at some point. But Affleck Batman will always be there, with the goal one day to have Aaron Ask America Ben Affleck edition, where he has to sit across from me and we talk.
That would be pretty interesting.
That'd be hilarious.
That'd be-
There was I think I forget how many years ago at the Dallas Comic Con that you just happened over the weekend. Ben Affleck showed up, and I was like, I have to go meet him. I have to go meet him because like I forget who canceled. Let's say it was Nathan Fillion. He canceled, and he was supposed to be like their big money maker. Mm-hmm. So he canceled. So they scrambled and they got Ben Affleck to show up, and I was like, ooh, doggy, I am going to meet this guy. Then they released the price tag.
Oh.
The price tag for just one photo.
Oh, and those things.
right? The price tag for just a photo with him was $250. And so the thing it is if you don't know, at a comic book convention, they get a sitting fee. So let's say Affleck's was $30,000, right? I'm not saying that it is. Let's say that it was. So the convention has to recoup that. So they have to make the prices of the people based off their sitting fee. So it was him, but it also wasn't him. But I was like $250, and I was like, oh. So I didn't get to meet my Batman. But I did get to meet Kevin Conroy, who was my Batman from Batman the Animated Series. I do have a picture with him. And on some Nokia phone or BlackBerry phone, somewhere has a audio recording of him. He did an audio recording for me on my phone of him in his Batman voice.
That's pretty cool.
I don't remember exactly what it said, but he did say, "I'm vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman." Whatever he said, it ended in that. I don't even know where it's at, man. It's so it makes me so sad. It's because he passed away, I think 2 or 3 years ago now, and but yeah, so I got to meet at least one of my Batman.
Yeah, that's. I'm assuming you met him like back before like social media was a huge thing, right? So we weren't downloading stuff on social media to keep it and stuff,
Oh
So
well, so like the pictures on Facebook somewhere on one of my albums or whatever, but I just don't remember where I stored the audio. It could be on my computer somewhere of him saying that because why would I delete that? Why did I want to get rid of that? Right? It could have been my phone could have got erased. I could have broke my phone, and that's how I lost it. There's all kinds of ways that I lost that audio back before the cloud showed up. I can tell you that much. It was before the cloud showed up, or that audio would have been backed up because I have so many things backed up on the cloud now. So, but yeah, so I'm looking forward to speaking to him about things of ministry because, like, now that you have dipped your toe, foot, and fallen into the pool of ministry, you
head
see,
first, man.
yeah, we
Head
were just
first.
talking about it the other night where ministry is a parade, right? The church is going this way. Some people hop on, right? Like Mike, hop on for a little bit and then bounce. And there's been just in the time that you and I have gone to this specific church, there have been people that jumped on for a little bit and then people that jumped off. There have been people that were on when we were first started going that are no longer going to the church for a variety of reasons. So like I want to talk to him about ministry and all those kinds of things because it's tough, right? Just being like so. I don't know if you and I have ever talked about the previous church I used to go to. I basically ran the church for the pastor because he was kind of absent.
Yeah.
So it's tough, especially when you're not supposed to be the pastor of the church, right? So it'll be interesting, and we've seen some of that, right? Especially when it comes to the youth, right? The youth where we have the youth come to the church where you can tell that without judgment that most of them have no clue what the gospel is. They don't care what the gospel is.
Yeah.
They're just there for whatever reason. We're glad that they're there. We want them to be there, but like
Well, it's one of those things, a lot of them come on Wednesdays only, right?
right,
Which isn't a bad thing because that's how it starts. And
yeah,
then a year later, their entire family can be at the church,
correct,
right? As soon as God gets a hold of their hearts, right? It's been pretty amazing because we've had several families that have come to the church, mine included, right? Because it was my son coming home excited that got me interested, right? And so it's just one of those things, but a lot of these kids would just rather come and hang out with their friends at the church, and good on them because they could be anywhere, right? At least they're doing it in a place where it's a safe environment,
yeah,
and we keep it that way, right? It's part of what we do, and what I do, is make sure that they have that safe environment, make sure nobody's acting up, make sure nobody's acting a fool, but just to have a safe environment for them to hang out and to be at without any worry of anything going on or anything like that.
yeah,
So it's that's where it starts, and they get to see like people who truly care, right? And aren't just like, yeah, okay, whatever, like people that actually care about what they're going through, and they get to hear some truth. Jackson does a really good job of breaking it down, really good for them, and so they get to hear it in a manner that really catches their attention a lot of the times. I know a lot of them are on their phones and they don't really pay much attention to it, but I feel as our small groups leaders for the kids, they they really try to drive it home right after Jackson,
Yeah.
right? And there's just the time and care put into these kids they don't get most other places. Most of them go to public school, and they don't get it there. And the ones that that are homeschooled at our church, that's a different feeling. That's a different place. But most of them that come on Wednesdays aren't a part of that group, and so they get it.
Yeah.
They get it there when they don't get it anywhere else. So.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, well, of course you wouldn't know. Chris and I are the enforcers on Wednesday nights. You are the enforcer of the kids because I don't have no authority. I don't want any authority. My ministry is not kids. Like the only reason that I'm there is because of my producer over there. If my producer wasn't there, I probably wouldn't be there.
Yeah,
But
you've left me hanging solo a few times.
yeah, I mean that was back in the day, right? That was back before he joined. But now I'm there just about every Wednesday. The only time that I'm not is when he's not there. But what's interesting is as he exits, Elise will be joining. So
And
there,
that's exactly what happened with us,
yeah,
right? Like Justin's last year. That's what's great about us going to youth camp. So this will be my third year going to youth camp, right? It'll also be Janelle's third year going to youth camp. She went the first time, and then I went the second time, and then the third time we both got to go together, and that was last year, and that was pretty awesome because it was my son's last time to go to youth
yeah,
camp. So we were all there together, and then this time we're both going, and it's my daughter's first time to go, right? So that's pretty cool too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I grew up going to youth camp. Some of the best memories I've had in my youth are from youth camp. So I'm glad that Dexter's involved in going. And in some ways, like I want to potentially go at least maybe one night just to see it, just to see the difference between what I went through and what he's going through as far as like, because I went up to the camp to help on the work day like 2 years ago, so I know what the camp looks like and the layout of it. I know where, the eating places, all that sort of stuff. But to actually see like the tabernacle or whatever it's called, sanctuary, whatever they call it over there, filled with kids and the concert aspect, of worship, and then the preaching and all that sort of stuff. Like I would like to see that, and maybe this year, probably not this year, but maybe next year. But before he definitely graduates, I'd like to. And when I say go, I know that PT goes back and forth a lot during the week. Like, hey, PT, are you going to be there on this day? Then maybe hop in the car with him because like this week when he's gone, we're going to go on vacation probably to like Galveston, and it's not going to hurt his feelings because he went to Disney, Universal, and then he's going to go to church camp. So he's already had a full summer. So if I could go down there and see it one night, I think that'd be pretty awesome.
It's an amazing experience, and credit to PT and Jackson and Blair because a church this small shouldn't be running a youth camp,
Yeah,
but there's something special about where they go and how just isolated it is, right? Because you get out there in the middle of nowhere and the kids get real, right? And they don't have any cell phone signal, but maybe a few places, and you have to like stand there like this while you're on the phone, right?
yeah,
So they don't get a whole lot of cellular time, which is great, right?
yeah,
They're out in the middle of nowhere, no phones. All they can do is be authentic and be who they're supposed to be, right? And not influenced by social media or anything. And so they get out there. You get small groups time. You get two. You get a morning session,
hmm
worship and church session. You get an evening worship and church session. You get an hour with The ladies get an hour with a woman speaker they have. The men get an hour session with Jackson, right? And so it's like nonstop. It's not like, hey, we're gonna go do this, and you get free time, but it's nonstop, just like boom, 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 and it's real, man. These kids come back feeling something like they've never felt before,
Yeah.
at least if they haven't gone. And for the ones that go, that have been going, right, it's an experience they only get once a year, right?
Yeah.
Because the distractions, right? I think that's the key, right? You eliminate the distractions and God can move mountains and everything, right? Not to say he can't anyway, but I think it's like for example, if you wonder why, like when you're reading the Bible, like they were able to do all these things that you read in the Bible, and you don't see it as much nowadays. Well, these people didn't have phones, they didn't have social media, they didn't have TVs, right? What did they have? They had the book, they
Yeah.
had word of mouth. They didn't even have the book back then, but
Right.
they were able to do, their whole life was surrounded by this, right? We have so many other things and so many distractions. Like we have so little time that we give over to that, and I think that's why, part of the reason why you don't see all the stuff like they did and stuff like that. But maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not, But I know going out there and you eliminate all those distractions, and these kids get a real experience that they don't get any other time of the year,
Yeah.
and so it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
No, I remember the same thing. And we didn't have cell phones back then, but there was other distractions like Nintendo or street hockey and stuff like that. Would all those distractions? But when you pull yourself away from the world and then isolate yourself, the problem is I see it then with me, and I see it now where it's like you get there, you get into this mindset of, God is there, God's moving, the Spirit's there, you can feel it, and then all of a sudden you come back to the the muck and the mess of life, and then all of a sudden everything that you were here is all gone, and then all of a sudden you're back to where you were before. So it's trying to figure out that balance of trying to not so much stay right here because you won't ever be here because here you're isolated from the mess,
Yeah.
whereas here you're right in the middle of it. So we're being affected by the world and the cell phones and all the other nonsense that goes around life. So I think if somehow, some way, the kids were able to figure out a way to stay there, because we couldn't do it, right? Then I think you might see a little bit more of a success rate within the youth group. But the problem is like there's an ongoing like stat. It's somewhere between like 85 and 90% of kids when they graduate high school, they leave the church and never come back.
Yeah.
And and if I don't know if you were there whenever Jackson let me speak, but that photo that is on Wayne Manor, I used that photo as a reference. That's a photo of my youth group, and most of those people don't go to church anymore. They don't have anything to do with church. So back in '99 when I graduated, the stats were still the same, right? I mean, the only person that I think is still going to church from that photo outside of me, I think is her name's Jennifer. Her son used to go to I forget his name. What was Jennifer's son's name? What was Jennifer's son's name?
Jennifer?
Yeah, do you remember the guy whose mom and I were in the same youth group together?
I think his name was.
He doesn't remember. That's weird. But anyways, he used to come. He's got an interesting. I just don't remember the name of it. But but he used to go to Second Mile, and he came up to me one time. He's like, "Hey, your mom, or not your mom,
Your mom.
your mom," and then just ran away. No. He was like, "My mom and you went to the youth group together." And I was like, "What?" And then, because I don't, you're there in front of me every Wednesday. I don't talk to any of the kids except for Jason, and he comes up to me and says, "My mom and you were in the same youth group together," and I was like, "Sorry, kid, not me. I don't know you." And then he told me his mother's name was Jennifer, and I was like, "Well, the only Jennifer, because there was one Jennifer that was a blonde, and he didn't look like her because she, anyways. And then there was another Jennifer, and I was like, it has to be her if that's it. And then, I was like, hey, is your mom Jennifer? Blah blah blah, and he was like, no, because he only knows her as
Married name.
right, Jennifer married name. And I was like, then I don't know who your mom is, bro. What's definitely not me. And then once we started talking more, then I realized who it was. And then when he got baptized after youth camp, I invited his mom to Second Mile, and she showed up. She was there for his baptism, and then she hasn't been back since. I saw her recently when my youth director passed away. We went to his funeral. She was there, but it was just. But back to the whole circle that I was getting to is back in 1999, the stat was real. Here in 2024, 2025, stat's still real. So
Yeah.
there's something that they're losing from church camp to graduation, right? It's not real to them, just like it wasn't real to us when we went there, right? Because here's my thought process, right? This is not a judgment thing or anything, but it's just my thought process. There is nothing in this world that I can fathom that will ever make me walk away from the church. And when I say the church, I mean Jesus, because I understand who he is, what he did on the cross, and the resurrection, right? There's nothing that I could fathom, and I'm not going to try to say that
Sure.
if somebody dies or whatever happens to me, but ultimately at the end of the day, right? So it's real to me because I understand that it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with events. It has nothing to do like when my parents pass away or anything like that. That like if all of this horrible negative stuff happens to me, like Jesus is still real. He still died on the cross, and he still resurrected for the sins of humanity as proof that the sacrifice was accepted. So like that's real and true to me. Anybody that walks away from the church, in my opinion, had never had that full realization of it. So all those people in that photo, including, my best friend Daniel, I couldn't even tell you maybe the last time he spoke to me about church or anything like that. But it's one of those things where it's like the reality is, right, that this moment in church camp, was it real or was it feelings? It's all going to come into their lives, right? Whether it's true to them or not. And that's why I think that like we have to figure out a way to get them to realize that this moment in church camp or this moment on a Wednesday night is more than just a moment. There is an actual God that's real. Mm-hmm. He died for you, and then he's still up there loving you now. Like, how do we make that real? I don't know.
Well, so here's my thing, right? And I don't think, and knowing this now, right, because I have a 19-year-old son,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's more than just them leaving the church, right? I think it's more of a like identity thing, right? They struggle with finding their place in life, right? Because they're like, I've known this my entire life, but I can't do that anymore. So what do I do, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have a hard time finding their place in life in general. And society doesn't make it easy on them, right? They tell them, you're 18, you're an adult now, we're not going to do anything for you, you have to go out and do it all by yourself. Yeah, well, they may be 18, but they're far from adults, right? Yeah. They're adult children, right? They still need help. They still, I look at my son and I'm like, was I that naive when I was his age?
Yes.
Yeah.
So was I.
And I was like, holy crap. Yeah. Like, I thought I had it all together, right? No, you're wrong, right? So I think it's more than just a church thing. It's just them losing their identity as a student, right? And trying to figure out what life has for them. And everything gets thrown at them so fast. They're like, what do I do, right? Shutdown mode.
Yeah.
Right? But I think one of the blessings we have at Second Mile is we have a night that is set aside for that 18 to 30-year-old group. And I think that's essential, right?
I agree.
Because it's just like, especially now, right? Now that we're starting to have more of the kids from the youth group graduate and they have a place to go that is still a part of what they knew.
Yeah.
Right? So it's better for them because now they have a place, right? Our church isn't a big place. We don't have classrooms. We don't have places like that for them, but it's a place where they still have their own night. They still have a place where they can still come together. They can still hear the word, and it's connection for them. And I think that's huge, right? There's a reason, right? They started doing it in Dallas at the Porch. And if you haven't heard of the Porch, it's the largest gathering of college age students in America, right? It's pretty insane. Some of the younger girls that work at the center have gone over there, and they're like, there's like 2,000 kids there, 2,000 college age students there, stuff like that, and it's massive.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of an identity thing, right? Like they don't know who they are and what they've done, and they get their first taste of freedom, and they're like, "I'm free," and then you're like, "I'm not free, I'm broke," right? And it's
Especially
like,
now.
especially now,
Especially
man.
now.
It's like, they want to be. They want to be their own person, but it's like, I really don't know what to do now. Like, what do I do, right? And then
Do you think that's a westernized capitalism thing? Because
probably.
do you think that a kid out in the tribe of Africa is having the same?
Well, they weren't probably. I mean, I don't know, right?
See,
I don't
well,
know
the-
because
the- the re-
their influences are completely different
Yeah.
from ours.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is like, yes, to a degree, but I think the identity that they're potentially searching for, if it was, and I'm not saying that Jackson isn't, because Jackson's phenomenal. He has brought up my faith in his generation by the conversations we've had with him. But if their identity isn't in who they are, or what they're doing with their life, or how much money that they make, or the friends that they have, if their identity is solely in Christ, then there's not a problem. And I'm saying that pointing at those people over there. I'm saying that as 25-year-old son who I know is struggling with the same thing, because like we've got this culture that has, instead of the church influencing culture, culture has influenced the church for far longer than you and I have been alive. So now here we are, we have all these other distractions than just football, because back whenever I was a kid, like the biggest distraction on a Sunday morning was the Cowboys play at noon, this pastor better hurry up, right? Type deal. Now there's everything, right? We sit in the back and I'm ADHD, so when people flare on their phones, like I'm staring at the pastor, I'm trying to concentrate, and all of a sudden I'm like,
That's
yeah,
why I'm
yeah.
glad I sit at the front.
I can't do
like,
that. I can't
you know,
do that.
I at first it was awkward. I felt like everybody was staring at me, and
I
then
am.
there's been a couple of times. I don't blame you. Like back of my head is pretty dead
Sometimes
sexy.
you walk past, I'm like,
But no, I tried sitting at the back,
Yeah.
right? And I am the 100% the same way. You got somebody over here that does this, and you're like, "What's that?" And you got somebody over here that does something, you're like, "What's that?" And
Yeah.
it just it's so
Yeah.
distracting. So I'm just like front. I'm glad I sit in the front. Like I don't have to worry about any of that. Like I'm there, and
Yeah.
that's like that. Just,
Here's what I'm
that's
going to
it.
say is you're sitting in my seat, so as long as you sit there, I'm going to sit in the back. What do you think about that?
Well, you're gonna be sitting in the back for a long time because I'm not moving.
Well, actually, you know what? You're not there on some Sundays because you're back there teaching the kids, so what's my excuse then?
You're comfortable
I'm
where
sitting
you
in the
are,
back. I'm
right?
sitting in the back. Don't sit in my chair. I bought and paid for that chair myself.
There you go. Right? No, it's funny that you say that because I actually one of the ladies that was a dispatcher at the record service I worked at. She went to the First Baptist of Church of where she was over there, and they had multiple services, and they had always gone to the 9 o'clock service, and they had sit in this one particular spot. Nobody ever bothered them, nothing like that. Well, they went to the 11 o'clock service one time, and this guy came up to him and was like, "You're in my seat," and she was like, "Seriously? Like this is a big church. Like you could sit anywhere, right? I'm sorry, like." We didn't know, like, this is where we had usually sat at the 9 o'clock service. I was like, but we're here now. And he goes, no. you're actually in my seat. My name's on it. And so they stood up, and they were the folding seats, that folded up like movie theater style.
Yeah.
And sure enough, his name was on a brass plate
Oh my
on the front of the seat. And they left the church. They were like, "We're not going to deal with that. Like,
Yeah.
you can have your seat, sir." Like, why would, you know what? I'm not going to get into it, but it's just like petty, right?
Yeah.
And you're just like, whatever, So it's like, we offer up our seats, right? Or not offer, but like,
Yeah.
we will, like, if somebody's getting baptized, we'll intentionally like not like take our time getting in there, and then if there's people sitting in the front row, we'll sit somewhere else, right? Like, no big deal, But
I think
church
that's-
is
yeah, I
church
think-
is way more than that.
I just think it's an old school mentality, right? It's something that will hopefully die with our parents' generation, along with a few other things. Like when I say that, I mean like the seat thing.
Right.
But I personally, I'm sure there's people out there, but I don't think I've ever seen a person in my age bracket be like, "That's my seat. You need to move." Right. I mean, I'm sure there probably is several instances out there of it, but like my whole.
I've never seen it at our church.
Well, yeah. Because we generally sit around the same people because everybody sits where they normally sit. But like, if somebody's sitting where we sit, we either sit a row in front of or behind. We move. It doesn't matter. I mean,
Yeah.
we're there. That's the thing that. That's the thing that I think the previous generation never got, was they should be happy that the person is there,
Yeah.
because they could be in a bar, they could be asleep, they could be in the bed with somebody they don't know that they met last night, but the person that is there is choosing to be, and they got into a car. In some cases, they got dressed, and then they're there, right? So it's like we should just be happy that they're there, and I think that's a relic from my parents' generation, because that's the kind of era that I grew up listening, like hearing people talk about. I can't believe she wore that dress, and like, who cares?
Well, I remember even like exactly what you were saying. I don't remember the year. I had a friend who.
1882.
No, it was. I think it was 2020,
No.
maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 2019. I'm not sure, but I had a friend of mine who was going through a really really tough time, and he started searching for something, right? And so he had a bunch of questions, and so he went to a bunch of local churches here in the area, 5 to be exact. Went to 5 different churches, sat down one on one with the pastor, and started asking him questions, and was kicked out of 5 of those churches. And then he went to the 6th church, and the pastor sat down with him and answered all his questions. And then he started going back, it was like on a Wednesday or whatever, on a
Yeah.
Tuesday morning, whatever. But he would go back like 6 weeks in a row, and he would sit down and talk with the pastor. And then he ended up finding his salvation and getting baptized. Well, there was 3 friends that showed up for him. Me and my wife were one, and then there was another guy and his wife and a third friend that showed up. But 2 of the ones that showed up, him and his girlfriend, he owns a tattoo parlor, Daddy Jack's, down the street, right? Phenomenal artist, does great work. He's done some of my work, but he showed up, and you look at this guy. He's a very ominous looking dude, right? Like, he
Right.
owns a tattoo parlor. You can only imagine his ears are about this big around, and he's got tattoos on his face, necks covered, everything. And I think back then he was wearing a mohawk,
Yeah.
and he's got a ring the size of a bullnose ring coming through his nose, right? And so, like, fit the profile, fit the build. Nice guy, right? He's not a Christian, but he does great stuff for like kids, foster kids and stuff like that. Raises a ton of money for him. He grew up in a foster program and everything, but a really great guy. But he showed up to support his friend getting baptized. And I just remember he sat over here and we were sitting over here, and there was a row of empty chairs around him and his girlfriend. Like, the entire church was like, there was a barrier between them and him. And I'm like, I'll never forget that image. And I'm like, and then they ask, right? Like, is anybody here with him? Like, please stand. And he stood up and he said something. And we stood up and Janelle had said something. But, like, that church, it was an old Baptist church, and like the entire congregation was just like a buffer zone around him. Like they wouldn't get close, they wouldn't even look at him, and I was just like, I see that, and it was pretty crazy. But as like you were saying, like hopefully that dies with it. Another thing that I hope dies with that generation is pews.
Pews. I haven't seen a pew in forever.
They're uncomfortable. Good.
Yeah, well, like if you go to I think my parents' church has a pew because they go to an old school Baptist church up the road, and it is old school where the pastor, not the pastor, song director is still using the hymnal and doing this with his hand. I'm like, this is every church I've ever grown up in, every church. But the pastor is really awesome, though. Like we've been trying to, my parents have been working on. Chrissy's parents try to see if we could, they can get her mom motivated to get back into church. And it's like, go try out their church. It's old school. It reminds you of your grandpa or her dad. Not, yeah, but yeah, just whatever. That's the thing that I hope my mindset never changes, as me just being happy that the person's there. Right.
Absolutely.
Just walking in the door, the way I look at it is if there's a girl that shows up that has a dress that's too short or a top that's too low, that like I pray that God saves her, and then he slowly works on bringing her into same thing with a guy, right? If he's not dressed appropriately, then I pray that God saves them, or if they're saved, that they're convicted into getting into, not that everybody has to look the same, because I'm not about that at all, but just in a way that like I would rather somebody show up looking like the devil, right? Because there's the potential of them being saved, because we don't
Absolutely.
know once they're saved what God's going to do with them.
Absolutely. And we all have different places where we could share that gospel, right? Like
Yeah.
Evan would be a good example, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's got friends in the motorcycle world, and he is a part of that world. And even through one of his friends that we've gotten a chance to meet, right, who's gotten saved and baptized, right? Like just being in that lifestyle, he can minister to that lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? I have my difference, you have your different places that we can all minister. And so just having somebody, you never know what they can do, right? Like I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name right now, but they're the old guy that evangelized Billy Graham, right? Like,
Okay.
Everybody forgets his name. He was an English guy from like way back in the 1900s, right? And so like he was an old school dude. Like if I remember the stories correct, like he would smack people, right? But like you don't remember him, but this one guy, right? He evangelized this one guy that made the impact difference of
Millions.
millions, man.
If you go on Sirius XM, they still have a Billy Graham channel that plays his old sermons.
Yeah.
I listened to one, I don't know, about a few months ago, and I was like, it's irrelevant today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? That people need to understand, right? Like, and I've heard this analogy used several times, and it's so correct, right? Like, you don't clean yourself up to go to the hospital. You go to the hospital bleeding out,
Yeah.
right? And then they fix you, right? You don't have to fix yourself to come to church. Just come to church and let God fix you, right? And that's what it's about, right? Just come, And I feel like a lot of people are misguided in that, right? Even people that consider themselves Christians, can be misguided on that, very much, not understanding what it actually means, not taking the time. And, one of the things I tell my kids and I talk to a lot of kids about is educate yourself. Don't listen to somebody and take their word 100%. Like, take what they have and go educate yourself on everything. And that's the same thing with the Bible and religion, right? Like, there's a lot of churches out there. There's a lot of information out there. Some of it may be wrong. Take it, and we're called, right? We're called to have the sword of the Spirit, right? In Ephesians, it talks about that, right? The sword of the Spirit. If you're not in the Word, you don't know what the Word says, then how do you know what that guy's talking about is the truth, right?
Yeah.
So go educate yourself on
You have to.
anything, any aspect of life. Educate yourself on what you're going to talk about and what you're going to do. Don't just take people's words for it.
Yeah. I think when you start taking people's word for it without checking for yourself, you're probably in a cult.
Yeah.
That's because if you're not checking somebody, right? Not that I check PT every week, but there are some things that he has said where, like last week's sermon, I was like, "There's some problems." So I text messaged a buddy of mine that I trust. That's one of the smartest people in the Bible that I know. I was like, "Hey, man, this is what was said. What does this mean?" And then he broke down the context for me, and I was like, "Okay, we're good, right?" So I'm consistently listening, but I'm also looking for checks too, just to make sure, because I mean, PT is an old school preacher, right? He doesn't step out of line too much at all, really. There's out of the entire time that we've been at the church, I could probably count on one hand issues that I've had, and four of them, I went to my buddy Aaron, which hopefully someday I'll have him on here. And then the one of the times I went to Baker, called him up, and I was like, "Dude, I'm having a problem." And then he talked to me about it. I was like, "Okay, cool, we're good."
Yeah, and I think you have to, right?
Yeah,
Like you have to. It's you have to, right? And not just in a church setting, but we're talking about in life in general. Because if anything, like the 2020 through 2024 has shown us, right, or even on to 2026, right, is like when you don't dive into the information yourself and you just take other people's words for it, it causes issues and it causes division for no reason, right?
right.
So you have to dive into the information yourself, right? You just
Totally
have
agree.
to, you know.
I totally agree. And so I think we've been doing this for almost 2 hours now. So I think we need to
Has
wrap
it
it.
already been 2 hours?
It's 8:30.
Holy
We
crap!
didn't get the signal. Usually we have Alexa like interrupt us or something like that. I don't know if you've gotten to that point in some of
I
the
have. You
podcasts.
know what?
Yeah, I know. But I guess it's
Alexa, stop.
Right on
well,
time.
no, that's different. I think I said her name.
Oh,
Alexa, stop. Okay. Well, generally, like I guess I only have the setting Monday through Friday where it tells my daughter to go to bed and him to go to his room. So, but
Alexa's on summer break.
yeah, "What are you talking about? I'm going to sleep, lady. You're asleep all day." But as you know, we end the show with giving you the opportunity to like drop some knowledge, whatever you want to, like some life kind of advice or whatever you want to say. Like the floor is yours, right, to say whatever you want to. If you want to cuss at the people listening, cuss at the people listening. If you want to burp in their ear, don't burp in their ear, but you know what I mean. So, like anything that you got as far as life lessons or anything like that, man, this is your time.
Um, I just want to stress some things we talked about. First off, if you're hearing something, educate yourself on it. But I think the biggest thing I could stress is for the men listening, right? We all need that person to lean on. And find yourself the people that will lift you up, that will come beside you, and really like find yourself a group that you can really trust and you have that circle to lean on, whether it be in a church setting, whether it be in another group setting. But we all need those people that we can confide in and talk to, and really bring ourselves to the table, right? It's nice to have people that you can cut up and talk with and keep surface level stuff with, but everybody needs that person that you can really rely on when you need them. And so find that, right? Find that group wherever you can and dive into it, because the enemy does isolate us, and that's the biggest lie, right? You are not the only one going through your situation. And while our situations may not be 100% the same, we experience the same emotion, the same feelings through our own experiences. So find someone that you can really relate to and lean on.
Awesome, I totally agree. Whether it's church, whether it's some sort of men's group like dad tribes or something like that, like find a group of people, because whether you believe it or not, there is somebody out there. We call him the enemy. He's out to get you, and the biggest tool is isolation, just like you were just saying. So I totally agree with you. Whether it's church, whether it's your brother, whether it's anybody that's in your circle, just find people you can be open and honest to. So, but yeah, Can you believe it? We sat down and we had a conversation. We didn't get too crazy.
No, I 100% believe it. Like, we always have great conversation.
Well, we have conversations every Wednesday that last basically an hour as they're up there doing the youth stuff. So yeah, I knew that this one would be relatively easy, especially since I know you so well that like, I wanted to make sure to get the pregnancy help for you stuff out there because I am a one topic voter. So like I will never vote for a person that's for abortion. So the pregnancy center is amazing for that sort of stuff because like that's what like I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat. If you're for abortion, I ain't for you. I won't vote for you, right? So, but yeah, so I at least want to make sure that information was out there, and just I appreciate you coming on here and chatting. I'm sure that at a certain point you'll be back. When we get when we're so big and we're in our own place, we don't have to worry about anything. We'll just come in here and you'll be like, this place is different.
As long as you remember these little people when you blow up and get big, right?
Hey, Aaron Ask America. It's got to go America wide, right? My next goal. So like I have a couple people from that. PT said he wanted to be on there. Blair says he would be on there. I'm sure Jackson would be on here. So, but like I'm trying to expand into areas of people that I don't know because that's really the entire purpose of it is to talk to people. I know that we didn't get it into any sort of like nuances of like stuff that you did as like a kid, like what you were into, because at some point, here's like a same time, same bat channel, like Batman 66, kind of like, hey, come back next time Chris is on. What was the name of that game? And don't go into it of what it entailed. What was it? It was called Streetlight Superman.
Streetlight Superman.
Yes.
Man.
We don't want any, no stories, no nothing. Okay. So here's like next time you see Chris's name on there and you got his big smiling face on there, he may or may not tell the story of Streetlight Superman, which is one of my favorite stories because,
It was wild times, man.
Yeah.
We grew up in no man's land. I'll just put it that way.
No man's land, no cell phones, no street light requirements of being home, kids just being out there. So, but yeah. So next time, maybe if you check the legal paperwork to make sure you don't get in trouble for telling these stories, or maybe we
statute of limitations, man.
Or we say, hey, I knew of a friend who played this game called Streetlight Superman. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed it. We did cover a lot of ground, kind of crazy, but we got it done.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, this has been Aaron Ask America, and we'll talk to you soon.
Aaron Ask America, we're talking real life. Truth, love, and struggle, no filters, no hype. From the heart of the people to the soul of the land, he's asking the questions you'll understand. Aaron Ask America.